Have you ever stopped to think about how some people can drain your energy? Imagine being in an environment where negativity is the norm, and with every interaction, you feel heavier. Now, what if I told you that there's a way to turn this situation into a powerful learning experience? Throughout my journey, I have encountered people who tested my patience, who seemed like soul suckers. Don't be fooled. Every challenge comes with a valuable lesson. What if I asked you, have you ever felt like you were fighting against a current? What would happen if you could swim with ease, dodging obstacles? The truth is, we have the power to shape our interactions. The secret lies in how we react. Are you ready to uncover these strategies? Imagine being able to transform toxicity into strength, using every encounter as a springboard for your personal growth. And believe me, this is possible. Let's explore these techniques together that will not only protect your inner peace, but also turn these relationships into opportunities for maturity. Are you ready for this transformation? Recognition and identification. You know that strange feeling we get when we're around certain people? It's like an internal alert is screaming. Learning to identify toxic behaviors was a real game changer for me. It's astonishing how often we are so caught up in relationships that we can't see the signs. Constant criticism, for example, may seem like a form of care, but in reality, it's a disguised way of devaluing the other person. I began to realize that in some relationships, what seemed like concern was actually a manipulation game. Another clear sign is negativity. Have you noticed how some people have this ability to turn any conversation into a sea of discouragement? We try to share something positive, and there comes the negative response, as if they want to extinguish the light of our happiness. Learning to recognize these behaviors was like putting on new glasses. I finally could see things clearly. And more. I realized it wasn't normal for me to feel bad because of how others behaved. And constant criticism? That's insidious. It may seem harmless, but if you stop to think, you start to notice that you're always being attacked, even if subtly. Each negative comment, each sarcasm, undermines our self-esteem. Recognizing this was crucial for me to begin protecting myself. I started paying attention to my reactions and the feelings those interactions stirred in me. This awareness helped me distance myself from those who weren't good for me. Now, let's talk about manipulation. Something that can be so subtle that, at many moments, we don't even realize we are being manipulated. After a while, I began to notice patterns in conversations. Some people have a talent for flipping the situation, making me feel guilty for something I didn't do. It's a complicated psychological game, but once you identify these games, it becomes easier to disentangle yourself from them. Finally, this recognition aspect isn't just about noticing what's happening around us, but also understanding our own emotion. By identifying toxic behaviors, I began to understand why certain interactions left me feeling so bad. This emotional clarity was crucial for me to establish a healthier trajectory in my relationship. Establishing boundaries. Once I started recognizing toxic behaviors, the next step was to establish boundaries. Oh, how challenging that was. Often, we are afraid of displeasing others or causing conflict. But I realized that without clear boundaries, I was merely feeding the toxicity around me. Defining what was acceptable and what wasn't became a priority in my life. And believe me, this not only protected me, but also brought a sense of relief. Communicating these boundaries assertively was one of the hardest parts. I used to feel guilty for saying no or for distancing myself from people who weren't good for me. But over time, I learned that being assertive doesn't mean being aggressive. It's a way of taking care of myself and showing others that I value my space and well-being. When I started being clear about my boundaries, I noticed that some people distanced themselves, but others respected and even appreciated my honesty. Establishing boundaries also helped me feel more secure in my relationships. Over time, I realized that those who truly cared about me were willing to respect what I needed. This dynamic brought a new air to my interactions. Dialogue became healthier, and when someone crossed the line, I already knew how to act. This clarity gave me a sense of control that I didn't have before. Another important thing I learned was the necessity of reviewing and reaffirming these boundaries from time to time. Relationships change, and what was acceptable at one moment may no longer be. Therefore, keeping communication open and revisiting what works or doesn't is essential. This not only strengthened my self-concept, but also improved the quality of the relationships I chose to maintain. Boundaries are not walls that separate. Healthy fences that protect our emotional space. By respecting these fences, I learned to receive the affection and attention I deserve. And, to be honest, this change was liberating. Controlled empathy practice. For many years, I used to let myself be carried away by empathy, completely immersing myself in others' emotions. This, of course, is not entirely negative, but I realized I was so involved in trying to understand the motivations of toxic people, I ended up losing myself in the process. Learning to practice controlled empathy was like finding a new and healthy balance in how I relate to others. The idea of understanding the motivations of someone who is acting toxic without allowing myself to be emotionally affected was a significant challenge. But over time, I began to see that empathy does not mean absorbing another's pain. This not only protected me, but also allowed me to view the situation from a more rational angle. When someone was acting negatively, I tried to understand that maybe this person was struggling with their own battles. This helped me not to take things personally. Maintaining that emotional distance gave me more clarity. I could observe behaviors without feeling responsible for fixing that person's problem. This released an emotional burden I used to carry unnecessarily. And believe me, this made all the difference. Controlled empathy allowed me to be supportive without getting lost in a sea of others' emotions. Another advantage of this practice was the ability to maintain a safe space for myself. When I could understand what motivated the toxic behavior, I didn't feel as vulnerable. This helped me react in a more balanced way and avoid unnecessary conflict. Could offer support without emotionally committing to the other person's pain. Finally, practice of controlled empathy not only improved my emotional health, but also strengthened my relationships. Those who genuinely wanted to talk and open up could do so without me feeling overwhelmed. And when that happens, interactions become healthier and more productive, creating a space where everyone can express themselves without fear of being judged or causing a negative emotional impact. Focus on self-esteem and self-confidence. When it comes to dealing with toxic people, the first thing I realized was the importance of focusing on self-esteem and self-confidence. Constant criticism and negativity that some people bring can be devastating if we are not prepared. I began to understand that my view of myself should not depend on others' opinions. Every time someone tried to belittle me, I reminded myself of my achievements and values. This practice of reinforcing my self-esteem became armor against negative attacks. One of the things that helped me build this self-esteem was practicing self-affirmation. I wrote a list of qualities I admire in myself and read it every day. This may sound silly, but repetition creates a deep connection with our essence. By reminding myself of these characteristics, I realized that the opinion of those who criticize me held no weight. Self-confidence began to sprout, like a plant that does not let itself be overshadowed by others. Additionally, I engaged in activities that made me feel good and reflected my abilities. This included sports, hobbies, and even seeking new learnings. Each small achievement became a brick in the construction of my self-confidence. When someone tried to bring me down, I had a reserve of positive experiences to lean on. This made me realize that I was so much more than the image others tried to impose on me. Another effective strategy was surrounding myself with people who truly valued and recognized my worth. The support of friends and family who encouraged me to be who I am was essential. Over time, I learned to filter the voices around me and pay more attention to those that truly mattered. This support network became a fundamental pillar in my fight against external negativity. Finally, the practice of gratitude also played an important role. By focusing on the good things in my life, I began to see that the criticisms and toxic behaviors of others were just noise. Gratitude helped me maintain a positive perspective and reminded me that I am worthy of love and respect, regardless of what others may think. Use of assertive communication. In a world full of interactions, learning to use assertive communication transformed the way I face toxic behaviors. Previously, I used to hesitate to express what I thought or felt. especially in situations that made me uncomfortable. But over time, I realized that being assertive does not mean being aggressive. It is the ability to communicate your needs and boundaries clearly and respectfully. When confronting a toxic person, I learned to be direct, but without losing my calm. Instead of entering into a heated argument, I started structuring my words in a way that conveyed my point of view without belittling the other. This type of communication requires practice, but the more I used it, the more natural it became. The feeling of being heard and respected is liberating and significantly reduces anxiety in interaction. Another technique that helped me was using I instead of you. For example, instead of saying, "You're being very negative," I would say, "I feel uncomfortable when the conversation takes this turn." This subtlety makes all the difference because it takes the defensiveness out of the other person and opens up space for a more productive dialogue. Assertive communication became a bridge, not a wall. It's interesting how assertiveness also impacted my self-esteem. By communicating clearly and honestly, I began to notice that people respected my opinions and boundaries more. This created a positive cycle. The more I asserted myself, the more confidence I gained. Thus, I not only protected my emotional space, but also inspired others to do the same. Finally, the practice of assertive communication taught me to choose my battles. Not every criticism or toxic behavior deserves a response. I learned to evaluate when it is worth taking a stand and when it is better to let things slide. This discernment skill is a gift that assertiveness gave me, and with it, I managed to maintain healthier and more productive relationships without being swayed by others' negativity. Desvio de conversas toxica. Whenever I find myself in a conversation that starts to take a negative turn, I feel an almost instinctive urge to redirect the discussion. It's as if an internal antenna starts to beep, warning me of the danger of negativity that is about to engulf me. I've learned that instead of getting swept away by the tide of complaints and criticisms, I can steer the conversation towards something more constructive. This skill not only protects me, but also helps create a more positive environment around me. One technique I often use is to ask open-ended questions. When someone begins to talk about a problem, I try to engage in a way that brings up solutions or positive aspects. For example, if a friend starts complaining about work, I might ask, "What do you think you could do to improve that?" This approach not only shifts the focus of the conversation, but also encourages deeper reflection, making the person feel more empowered to find their own answers. Another strategy is to share a personal experience that has a positive angle. If someone is talking about a challenge, I might mention a time when I faced something similar, but it ended up resulting in learning or growth. This not only diverts the focus from negativity, but also shows that I am willing to engage in a constructive dialogue, and that together we can find a better way forward. The exchange of experiences, when done lightly, can be profoundly enriching. Additionally, there are times when simply changing the subject subtly is the best tactic. If the conversation starts to get heavy, I might say something like, "Hey, did you see that movie that came out over the weekend?" This shift can be unexpected, and often the person adjusts quickly to the new direction. The key is to do this naturally, so it doesn't seem like I'm trying to avoid the conversation, but rather that I'm looking for a lighter and more enjoyable space. Lastly, it's important to remember that I don't have to carry the weight of other people's toxic conversations. Sometimes it's just a matter of establishing a pattern of interaction that prioritizes positivity. If someone insists on maintaining a negative tone, I can be more direct and say, "Look, I really prefer to talk about lighter things. How about we discuss something that makes us feel good?" This creates space for the person to rethink their approach, and in the end, might even lead to healthier conversations. Busca de support externo. The search for external support is a crucial step I've learned to value when dealing with toxic people in my life. It's not easy to face these situations alone, and often the emotional pressure can be overwhelming. That's why, over time, I've realized the importance of having a support circle. Friends, family, or even professionals can offer the perspective and relief we need to handle the stress that problematic relationships can bring. Talking with friends about the experiences I've been living helps me see things differently. Often they bring up insights I hadn't considered. They can point out behaviors I hadn't noticed, or simply offer a listening ear. This exchange not only helps me feel less alone, but also gives me the confidence I need to make more assertive decisions regarding these toxic relationships. Furthermore, getting involved in support groups or therapy can be a great way to learn how to deal with toxicity more effectively. Trained professionals can offer strategies and tools that I might not be able to develop on my own. Their experience and the safe space they provide are fundamental for me to explore my feelings without fear of judgment. This helps me understand that I'm not alone in this struggle and that there are paths to overcoming it. Interacting with people who have gone through similar situations is also extremely valuable. Knowing that others have faced similar challenges and have managed to overcome them brings a sense of hope and motivation. These stories of resilience inspire me to believe that I can also change my situation and that the support of others is a fundamental part of this process. Moreover, it strengthens the idea that we are all human and we are all in this journey together. Finally, the search for external support has taught me that while I may be the only one responsible for my happiness, I don't have to face everything alone. Having a support network not only provides me with emotional security, but also helps me maintain a healthy perspective when things get tough. This connection with others is undoubtedly one of the best defenses against the toxicity that can sometimes seem insurmountable. So now that we've explored these 7 powerful strategies for dealing with toxic people, it's time to reflect. Have you ever stopped to think about how these interactions affect your life? How do you feel when you're surrounded by negativity? Remember, you have the power to choose who deserves your time and energy. Imagine being surrounded by people who uplift you, who share your dreams and aspirations. What would that change in your daily routine? What new opportunities could arise? And don't forget, setting boundaries is not just a defense, but a form of self-love. How will you apply these tips in your daily life? Start small. How about identifying a toxic person today and practicing one of the strategies we discussed? Before I wrap up, I want to know, which of these tactics did you resonate with the most? Leave your comment below and let's talk about it. And if you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss out on more valuable tips about personal development. Remember, transformation begins with you.